Welcome to OLC 4.0, Term 1B. This is Class 9. We are still in Unit 1 on Assignment 12. This is Tuesday, November 28th, and I am Jillian Percy. If you are trying to contact me, studentwork.nnec.on.ca is the best way to send the work. Make sure you include your full name, the course name, the assignment number, and name. If an assignment asks you for both a rough and a good copy, make sure you label them and include them both in the same email if possible, please. Here are all the ways you can listen in on the recordings. If you want to talk to me about an assignment, you can message me at jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. I check that all the time. You can also go to capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA on Facebook. And if you want to listen to a recording again, they are saved on YouTube at the same address. If you need to take a photograph of an assignment, if you possibly can, please send it as an attachment. If you send it directly as the email, it's very hard for us to print off, and it doesn't show properly on the computer. Hang on, it's done this again. I thought we had solved that problem, but we seem to not have. I'm so sorry. I had talked with the tech person and we dumped some things, and yeah, it's still a bit of issues. I apologize. Here we go. Okay, so today's work, we're going to understand and identify prepositions and prepositional phrases, understand when to use a comma with a prepositional or adverb phrase, the difference between a summary and a news article. Think about the audience for this article and what information they will want to know about. Understand and apply the writing process stages for pre-planning and drafting. Apply the news article format to our own writing for assignment 12. Locate images that illustrate the concept of a news story. Learn how to create an interesting headline. Understand and apply paragraphing in a news article. And we're going to have a little introduction to using quotation marks in our writing and how it affects paragraphing. So we have a lot today. It's kind of a big assignment. There's a lot of new things happening at once here. We're just going to kind of try and finish off our work on prepositions here. Remember that a preposition is a word or several words that connect a noun or pronoun to the rest of the sentence. And the preposition will show you what type of relationship that noun or pronoun has to the rest of the sentence. It may show time, like at, in, on, or during. It may show the place or location, like at, in, or on. Again, they get used a lot. Direction, through, towards. Agency, who's it by or with. Measurement, of, about, between. Source or origin would be like from or of. Manner, with, by, like, as. Purpose, due to, because of, thanks to. Or possession, to, of, with, or for. There are a lot of prepositions. I haven't covered even remotely all of them. So looking at some prepositions of direction, these are the prepositions I think of when I first think of prepositions, right? Things like above, across, along, among, around, at, behind, below, beside, close to, over, through, and towards. And you can see how they're used. The milk is above the soda in the refrigerator. My friend lives across the street from me. The ducks are eating along the river. If I just said the ducks are eating the river, it wouldn't really make sense. The girl was sitting among her friends. They told stories around the campfire. Meet me at the stop sign. The employees parked behind the store. I find these ones are really great for helping us to visualize what's going on in the sentence. Here are some other ones: up, down, between, by, inside or in, near, next to, on, onto, off, past, or under. Some prepositions are trickier than others. For example, it's not really very logical to say you're on a bus or on a train or on a plane rather than saying you're in one, because really we are in one, but that's just kind of how we say it. It's what they call idiomatic. In other words, it doesn't necessarily make sense if you just look at the literal words, but it becomes sort of a phraseology that is how we say that in English. And every language has idiomatic phrases, right? But prepositions are very commonly, you have to kind of memorize how they get used sometimes. These are often used with verbs that involve movement to try and show what direction you are moving into. So here is some sentences, and we're going to look at what would work as the correct preposition to connect the sentence. And sometimes more than one could be correct, right? It would just depend what's actually happening. I saw the man something the woman. To run towards the woman, away from the woman, or through the woman. Well, towards or away would both work. It would just depend on what you're describing. You probably wouldn't run through the woman, right? If you're meaning he ran into her or ran over her, those have different kind of connotations. So we're just going to pick towards for right now, just to kind of give it a sense. He tried to grab her, but she danced something him. By him, away from him, or towards him. Well, if she's trying to get away from, right? He's trying to grab her. She doesn't want to be there. The kitten jumped something, the laundry basket, into, onto, or under. Definitely, I would say into. Okay. The little boy climbed something, the ladder on the playground. Up the ladder, down the ladder, or across the ladder. Well, either up or down works. It just depends what the little boy is doing. I'm going to pick down just kind of for fun here. He wouldn't really go across a ladder, right? Unless the ladder was somehow like leaning in from one spot to another, which wouldn't be very safe. The keys dropped something, the steps, down the steps, towards the steps, into the steps. Into doesn't really work. You can't go into a step. Towards doesn't make much sense either. I would say down the steps. I can picture you dropping them and them falling kind of down the steps in a little huddle. I think I'm going to drive something, the park, to the park, into the park, up the park. To, because you're thinking about a place, right? You're driving to that place. The little girls began to skip something, the path to the woods, along the path to the woods, under the path to the woods, or among. Among would apply like a bunch of people. Like you might say you were among the trees or among your friends. You wouldn't really use it for one thing or for a path, but you could certainly skip along a path. I don't think there's any way you could skip under a path unless we're thinking of like, I don't know, an overpass over a road or something. It took all day to hike out of the canyon, with the canyon, or over the canyon. So canyon's like a big giant hole in the ground. So you would use out of, right? You're kind of inside the canyon and you're getting yourself out of the canyon. Okay. Prepositions of manner. Prepositions of manner describe how something happens or how it's done. They provide information on the way the action was carried out. So common prepositions of manner include words like by, in, with, like, or as. Some examples would be she writes with a pen, they came by car, he plays soccer like a professional. The children listened in silence. The book was written as a collaboration. They just kind of show the manner, whether it's with a tool or a particular way, or if it's being compared to something else. Prepositions of cause and effect are a special type of preposition of manner. They generally establish a relationship between an event and its consequence, which is called cause and effect. They're often used to explain reasons or justify actions. The most commonly used prepositions of cause and effect are because of, due to, thanks to, from, as a result of, and out of. So here are some examples in a sentence. They couldn't play because of the rain. Now, I couldn't just say they couldn't play because the rain. It has to have the of there. The school is closed due to snow. We won the game thanks to her excellent performance. Many people suffer from allergies. He failed as a result of not studying. He managed to succeed out of sheer determination. They indicate a cause and effect relationship, why something has occurred, or giving a reason for the action. So let's try these out. The store is open late, something midnight madness. Because, due to, or since. We're going to use due to. And one of the reasons because has to have the of, it's partly idiomatic, but because is supposed to be joining two clauses. It wouldn't really work here, right? Because this isn't a clause. The tire went flat because of a nail puncture, by a nail puncture, or with a nail puncture. So definitely because of, because here you're giving a reason, right? She dances at a professional, on a professional, or like a professional. I really hope she is not dancing on some poor professional. No, they're comparing her. The manner that she does it is just like a professional. I came to Montreal from train, by train, or with train, by train. That's the manner that they came, was by a train. I raced through that exam, something, a man on fire. So we're comparing how he raced to a man on fire. When you're thinking of comparing, you're thinking of words like or as. Those are words we use to compare things. He screamed loudly due to fear, across fear, or to fear. Definitely due to. All right, we're giving an explanation for why. Something the donations, we can keep the drop-in center open for another year. Thanks to, from, or since. And this is one where we use the word thanks to. The branches were all broken off during the windstorm, by the windstorm, from the windstorm, or past the windstorm. I would say during. You could also say by. During is telling you when, by would be telling you how. So they're both prepositions. They would both work. They both make sense. They're just giving you different types of information. Okay, so now we are switching over to our main work. This is assignment 12. This is a really complex assignment. There's a lot of different elements to it. So I'm going to be going into a lot of detail today about how to do it well, because it is really a tricky assignment. So first, before we go any further, I want to look at the writing process because it's pretty crucial to this one. So there are 5 main stages to the writing process: pre-writing or planning. And in this stage, you'll gather and generate ideas on a subject. The main goal in this stage is to get the ideas flowing and put them onto paper. Mapping and brainstorming are 2 different types of pre-writing activities. Drafting. In this second stage, you will begin the actual process of giving shape to your ideas by designing a rough outline and writing a first draft, or what we usually call a rough copy. The words and phrases from stage 1 are put into sentences in this stage, but usually the sentences will need some refining later. So these are the 2 main stages that we're going to be looking at during this activity. But there is a third stage, which we'll be looking at a lot tomorrow. In the third stage, you look over your piece of writing to make sure that the ideas flow smoothly and that the entire piece makes sense. Changes are then made to improve the piece of writing by adding, cutting, replacing, and ordering. If a computer is used, text can be easily changed using the many features of WordPerfect or Microsoft Word or Google Word. There we go, Google Docs, sorry. Section 4, we'll also look at tomorrow. That's the section where you correct your spelling, grammar, punctuation. This is the first time that you need to worry about these finer details. Any time before now is unnecessary before the text of writing may change, and also because it can get in the way of the creative process. Proofreading is checking for typographical errors in the final copy. That's kind of this stage where you're just kind of polishing up the little details, right? And then publishing is the final copy. Sometimes it might be you writing it over good in handwriting, it might be you typing it might be you sending it into a publication, sending it to me. That's the publishing stage. It's really important to note that writing is not a 1 to 5 stage process, like a linear process where you step forward like on a road and you never get off. A lot of the best writers do numerous drafts and go around and around and do many revisions, not divisions, before they're ready for the editing stage. And the number of drafts and revisions a writer does is no reflection of his or her writing ability, and neither will it be for you. Okay. So sometimes the best way to make sure that you understand something is to try and summarize it a little bit and see if you can put it like in a word or in a sentence. So if I were to summarize pre-writing, what is like the main goal or the main activity of pre-writing? I would say the main idea of pre-writing is to get some ideas started and down onto paper. You might outline the order. Okay. Drafting. What's the main idea or the main activity for drafting? And basically, drafting is turning your words and thoughts into complete sentences and, I would say, paragraphs. Revising. Revising is when you are improving the rough draft through, I was going to say multiple ways. Multiple ways. We'll talk more about those ways tomorrow. It's a big part of tomorrow's thing. Editing is when you are correcting your spelling, grammar, and punctuation. A lot of times people think revising is really the editing part, but they really are kind of different. I'm just going to make this a little smaller so it fits. Publishing is when you submit it to your audience or for publication, I guess. So obviously, in many cases, I am your audience, but that can change throughout the thing too. So that's just kind of our quick summary of these. Okay, so here's the actual assignment. Now, I think it's a little confusing how they phrase this assignment because at first it sounds like reading the article and understanding it is our assignment, but it really isn't. They're just kind of giving us another news article for us to be able to go over and review how we write a news article so that you have it kind of fresh in your mind as we go into, because our main assignment today is writing a news article, not reading one. But we are going to go over this one, okay? So it says, the following is another example of a news report. This one has been highlighted to show the different parts of the news report that you will need to include in your own. City's third bus fatality is the headline. Ottawa, July 27th. Yesterday afternoon, a pedestrian identified today as Joe Jones was fatally struck by a bus while crossing Bank Street near Walkley Road. He was running with an iPod when the accident happened. That's our lead, right? The lead should always have all 5 W's plus the H. Michael Andrews, an off-duty police officer, was first on the scene. Andrews reports, I gave him first aid and emergency teams arrived here quickly. Unfortunately, we were unable to revive Joe Johns. It is believed that he died on impact. Witnesses were left in shock following the accident. Amy Ansey was driving east on Walkley when she witnessed the accident firsthand. I will remember that for the rest of my life, she sobbed. I felt helpless as I watched him run unknowingly into traffic. Johns was a single father of 2 teenage girls and lived in the Alta Vista area. John's friends came forward on a Facebook memorial site today, leaving messages like, John, you are my friend, may you rest in peace. And many respondents cited John's tremendous compassion. You were there for my family when I was sick, and I will be here for yours. Bank Street was closed last night for 2 hours while officers investigated the accident scene. It appears that the bus driver had followed all traffic regulations and that Johns had tragically run into traffic. Okay, so you probably noticed the following. The headline or title announces the story. The lead is written in bold. Now, that's just here because they're wanting to emphasize it. In an actual newspaper, it's not necessarily going to be in bold, just kind of so they can show it. The lead should show you who, what, when, where, why, and how. The reader should be able to read that sentence or sentences and not have to read any further to understand the main parts of what happened. Should be no more than 1 or 2 sentences in length for the lead. Aim to be concise and clear. There's always time to explain and expand on things later. The lead is just supposed to be very punchy with all the main information. Who is underlined? What is, again, they're doing this to kind of show you the information. I don't like how they did this, sorry. Who is underlined? Who is the pedestrian or Michael Andrews? No, not Michael Andrews, I apologize. Joe Johns. What happened? He was fatally struck by a bus. Where? Crossing Bank Street. Why? He ran into the traffic. How? He ran into traffic and the car ran into him. So now that you've seen a couple of examples of what a news report should look like and contain, it's your turn to try it out. You're going to be using the writing process, which we just kind of reviewed, to create your own report. Follow the steps to create your rough draft. You'll be putting the finishing touches on it in assignment 13. Make sure you refer to the checklist on page 44 and then use the rubric on page 46 to help guide your writing. This rubric will be used to evaluate your news report later on in the unit. Okay, so here is the news report checklist. So after you do the whole assignment, run back through this and make sure that you remembered everything. If you didn't, that's fine. Just go back and add it in there. The headline is short and catches the reader's attention. A date is included in the report. You've told who. The what, when, where, and why are correct and they make sense. The how demonstrates understanding of the event. That might not be in the lead. It might kind of come a little bit afterward. The quotes are thoughtful and appropriate to the event. The level of detail demonstrates considerable understanding of the event. Okay, and then here they list like 3 or 4 questions because they're trying to break it down into smaller sections. Sometimes people get very into creating the rough draft, but they forget to fill these out. Please make sure you do, because I do mark them and they're a good chunk of your mark actually. So first of all, choose a topic for your news report. For this particular assignment, you will use any of the events you thought were newsworthy in chapter 1 of Jimmy Comes Home. You will have to make up some details, but you should use any information provided by the novel to come up with the answers to your 5 W's and how. Your topic will become your headline. You can use something like juvenile offender back in town as your headline, or choose something else. 2 means 2 marks. Now, I'm going to say right here and now, I hate this headline. I think it's really inappropriate, and I will discuss that more later. I really don't want you to use it if you do watch this. It's really unlikely that a newspaper would phrase it that way because juvenile offenders have rights. And this question that headline kind of violates their rights a bit, I think. Anyways, news reports often have photos to visually show the event being reported on. Draw a picture or locate a photo or other graphic in a magazine or newspaper from the internet that would appear with your news report. 5 marks just for giving an appropriate photo. Number 3, figure out which details you want to include. Remember, you're going to have to make up some details, and your report should include at least 1 quotation from someone in the story and quotation marks to show that they're giving their exact speech. For example, Jimmy's grandma commented, "I'm so happy that you're home again." You do not have to use that quote. Some people felt like that meant they had to use that quote. No, you can use your own quote. You can make something up. Don't worry about it. Even if you're planning to use this as your headline, you still need to write a sentence saying that, like, my headline will be, juvenile offender back in town, or whatever it is. You have to actually answer it, not just put it at the top of the page. Number 2, make sure you show me what the photo is. Number 3, think about what quotations will be appropriate. We do talk about this a little bit more later on. Now, number 4 is the biggie. This part is worth 20 marks. Write a rough draft of your news report. It must be 1 page in length, handwritten. Don't worry about the fine details, spelling, grammar, punctuation right now. You'll take care of that when you're preparing for your final copy. For now, just focus on getting your story down on paper using the inverted pyramid structure and ensure that all the elements are present. Now, I've covered this up just because I think it confuses people, but right here is tomorrow's assignment. Sometimes people get confused and try to hand me in both at once, but don't worry about that. Just do assignment 12 first, and then we will worry about assignment 13, okay? Here is where you need to use your understanding of a news article. The most important stuff has to be up top, include all the 5 W's. Less important stuff as you go down, which would include any quotations. And we're going to think about all these things. Who might give a quote? Who wants to read the story? What would the audience even care about? Now, here's the next thing. Sometimes what people give me is really more of a summary, not a news article. So you don't want to give me a summary, okay? And here's the difference between those two things. A summary is usually written in a paragraph or a hamburger format. Usually there's a topic sentence and then a bunch of details and then a closing sentence. A news article is going to follow that inverted pyramid or inverted triangle format where there's a headline, a lead, important details, and less important details. A summary lists events in the order they occurred. A news article lists events in terms of what's important. A summary will have quotations that are an example of the dialogue and the relationships between people. In a news article, quotations are used to show different people's experiences or their opinions on events that have occurred. In a summary, concepts are summarized equally. Sorry, I just realized. Examples and details may be omitted, okay? For a news article, information that is of importance to public safety or public rights is more important than individual experiences and are more likely to be reported on. So this is just a list or kind of a summary of events in a list format, okay? And I wanted to do this so you can get across the idea like, this is not what I'm looking for the assignment because I've already done it and I'm showing it to you. And if I wanted you to do it, I wouldn't do it for you, okay? So I went through chapter 1 bit by bit, and here's a list of, to me, what seems like all the important events. Number 1, Jimmy is in an airplane above Green Star Lake and thinks about the events that cause him to leave. Number 2, Jimmy and his probation officer land at the airport. Number 3, a band constable and an RCMP officer are waiting for them. Number 4, Jimmy gets upset when he thinks they are going to body search him. His probation officer helps him calm down. Number 6, Jimmy talks to the constable who welcomes him back. Number 7, they don't search his bags, which he was worried about. Number 8, Jimmy walks to his grandmother's house while his probation officer goes to the band office. Number 9, Jimmy sees some of his old friends. Number 10, he talks to some little kids and one of them asks if he's going to burn anything. Number 11, Jimmy thinks about his friendship with Gary. Number 12, he also thinks about how he set the fire and what happened afterwards. And number 13, he's happy to get to his grandma's yard and see his snowmobile and his grandma. Okay, so first of all, what I just wrote is basically a summary of the events in a list format. It's not a news story, okay? So what you write will not sound like that. The main thing to think about with a news story is news stories are written for people to read. People are literally paying money to read those stories. So the main purpose of a news story is to inform people about stuff, but it also has to be interesting, okay? So if you were a real reporter, who would your audience be for a story like that? Not me, right? I'm just a teacher. Who would actually be reading this story about this Green Star Lake kid coming back to his community. Who will be reading it, and what would be important to them? Picture if someone had gotten in trouble for setting a fire and was returning to your hometown. What would the people around you be thinking about? What might they be wondering about? Would they be happy, sad, angry, worried? So our audience is who? Where do they live? Well, I mean, probably Green Star Lake, right? Hang on a second. Because somebody out of Green Star Lake, why would they be so interested in one boy returning, right? What age are they? Okay, so they could be any age, but typically people that are teenagers are not normally reading paper a lot. Now, that's a generalization. I'm sure some of you know or may be teenagers who read the newspaper a lot, but it's not usually the audience, right? Generally, the audience is whatever adults that live there, right? What gender are they? Gender wouldn't matter. I don't think it would matter whether you were a boy or girl or anything else. That isn't relevant. Some stories that might be relevant, like if they were reporting about, say, a guy who's been going around raping women, that might be a story that's very important to women. Or if the government had just passed a law saying all men had to serve in the army no matter what for 2 years, that might be a story that was very important to men. So sometimes gender can be an issue, but not always. Is economic status or availability an issue? I would say no. And again, sometimes that might be an issue in a story. If they're changing taxes for the wealthy, that might be an issue. If they were offering a new benefit for people under a certain income, then how much money you make might be an issue and might be relevant to how interested you were in a story. So it can be an issue. What do you think adults that live in Green Star Lake care about? It could be different things. Some of them might care about safety. Someone might care about heritage, like maybe they're just glad that he's back in town. Some people might care, maybe he's family, and so they care about him as family. Maybe they want to make sure he gets a second chance, right? Maybe they don't. You don't know. You kind of, as a reporter, are trying to think about what would make people want to read this story. Because as a reporter, you're getting paid to write, and you're getting paid to write interesting stories. So people don't enjoy your stories, you're not going to be a reporter for very long. So remember that in this, I'm not your real audience, right? Yeah, I'm going to read it, right? But your audience is the people that you think might read an article about this. Think about the kind of articles that you've seen in, say, Wabate News or in Sioux Bulletin or the Chronicle Journal, that kind of thing, right? This is the next big one. What would a reporter know or have asked? What access to information does the reporter have? So in the chapter, one of the big conversations happens between Frank and Jimmy. And I find a lot of people want to use it in their story because it's where there's a lot of talking. But the problem is there's no reporter on the plane. So the reporter, how would he know what they said to each other unless they said it to him? In which case it might be like, Frank said to the reporter, oh, Jimmy was worried, but I calmed him down. Like they wouldn't have the exact words that they said, right? That wouldn't make any sense because the reporter wasn't there. The reporter might have access to the police reports or the original news stories about the fire, or he might have interviewed people like the chief, the police, his grandma, his friends, a teacher. What would those people say about Jimmy coming home? They might not all have the same opinion, right? The chief might think one thing. The police might think something different. His grandma might feel very differently, right? They might have very different opinions. Because of that, they might say very different things in quotes that you could use. Remember that you're allowed to make up some quotes because the actual chapter doesn't have a lot of talking. A lot of it is Jimmy thinking about stuff, right? So as the reporter, you may kind of have to think about who would the reporter have talked to that would be talking about the events in the chapter? Like maybe the chief is, remembering the events back when he was 15 and hey, don't worry about it. We are glad to give him a second chance. Or maybe the police are like, oh, we're going to be keeping an eye on him. Like they still would be commenting on the events, but it doesn't have to be something they actually said in the chapter, is the best way I can put it. Remember that inverted triangle or inverted pyramid format, okay? The 5 W's, not necessarily the H. I'm going to take that away. The 5 W's should all get told in the lead. How might come next, right? It might be more detailed. Any really important details, which might be the how. And then things that might be interesting, but if they got left out of the story or cut, people would still understand what was going on. In a really good writing of a news article, that first paragraph or a couple sentences should tell the main part of the story to anybody who reads it. Okay, so creating a headline. It is part of the mark. You can use the unimpressive headline they gave us that I'm unhappy with. Here are some of the details if you want to try making your own headline, okay? It should be eye-catching. It should make you want to know more about the story. It should be truthful. It shouldn't be fake clickbait type stuff that doesn't really match the story. Like you wouldn't say murderer returns to town and then you read the story, there was no murder, right? Present tense. One of the funny things about headlines is they often are written in the present tense. Like rather than man robbed store, it's man robs store. It's tricky. I'm not quite sure why. Anyways, grammar would just be the most important words. They don't always include every single article and every single preposition, right? It's kind of this funny, very short form kind of speech because there's usually a limit on how many characters they have room for at the top of that story. It's usually bolded. It's a little bit darker, so it catches people's attention. It generally starts with a capital letter. It does not need any kind of period or end punctuation. I think if there's anything else. So here are some examples. Like a man saved the dog. No, that's not really a headline. Man saves dog. Yeah, that's a headline. A group of thieves robbed the bank. No, that's a sentence. A headline would be gang of thieves robs the IBC bank. A woman almost drowned going through the ice, or woman falling through ice barely survives drowning, right? There's a little element of drama to it, kind of, right? To kind of capture people's attention. So here are just some examples of headlines, and you can see there's kind of bigger headlines, what they call above the fold. Usually newspapers are folded halfway, and the most important stories are at the very top, right? And same thing here, you can see really big, and then smaller headlines for different stories. And you can see they capitalize the first letter or, a title, like a name like Texas. But they don't necessarily capitalize every single word, right? Get outside, but stay safe. US Constitution could block Trump from ballots. Workplace illnesses added to WCB list. So it's kind of a short form, the way they do headlines. Just wanted to mention the Youth Criminal Justice Act. It is illegal to post a youth's name or photo or any type of identifying information in a publication unless they were tried and sentenced as an adult, right? Like if somebody committed, murdered 3 people and then were tried as an adult, then it can be reported on because they've waived their status as a juvenile, essentially. Or if they posed a serious threat of harm to the public. So let's say the youth escaped from the police and was, I don't know, on a murderous rampage or whatever, then they could report it so people knew who it was, or they could post a picture of the guy. But in general, we're not supposed to. So you can't use Jimmy's name in the headline, and really you should not use his name in the article, okay? In real life, I kind of question whether juvenile offender back in town would be considered appropriate, because in a small town, that might be considered identifying information, right? How many people are going to be flying in? So it's already written there. I didn't right? This is been I'm kind of teaching from that someone else wrote. I guess we can use it, but I would really love to see a more appropriate headlines been like community welcomes returning youth or youth gets a fresh start. I think it's a little more positive, right? This is still a kid. We're still hoping that they're going to be able to turn things around. Remember to pick a photo or draw an image. It should be interesting. However, again, it still can't be of Jimmy because he is a minor and it is illegal to post the name, picture, or identifying information about a minor who's been charged with a crime. So what kind of photos might be appropriate? Maybe a photo of Green Star Lake. Now, I know it's an imaginary, right? You could draw a picture though, like an imaginary picture, or you could take a photo and kind of rename it as Green Star Lake. You could take a photo of the band office that got burned, or a photo of the school, or another like important building in Green Star Lake, or a photo of the plane they're flying in, or a photo of the band constables, or maybe the chief. You wouldn't probably use a photo of his family though, because again, that would be identifying information. Okay, so all of this is kind of stage one. It's part of our pre-planning, right? We're trying to help ourselves generate ideas before we start trying to write the rough draft. Hopefully you've got some notes and some ideas written down on some lined paper. If you haven't, now is a great time to do it. One helpful thing to do before you start writing your rough draft is to do some outlining. Outlining is just when you kind of arrange your ideas in order of how you want to write about them. This is especially important if you just wrote down all your ideas without sorting them out first. And it just kind of depends. Like some people just kind of they write a bunch of things down as they get the ideas. Some people are more organized. Neither way is better or worse. But before you go to do your rough draft, it can be really helpful to kind of put them in order. So as you're writing, you know what you're going to be, how your flow of the sentences is going to be. So here is an example of what you might have so far. And I haven't added a lot of details, okay? So I might have written down who my audience is. I might have thought about what they want to know. I might have made sure, I'm going to take out the H here, what the 5 W's were. I might have thought about my possible headline. What are some possible details? Do I need to make anything up that would be important? What are some quotes and who said them? So these are all my notes before I even read. These do not have to be in sentence order. So audiences, I might have adults who live in Green Star Lake. Very simple. What do they want to know? Well, what do they want to know? They might want to feel safe. Maybe they are glad someone is out of jail, right? Maybe they're a relative and they're, pleased to see him home again, right? So these might become sentences, but they don't have to be sentences in your jot notes, okay? However, sometimes I get people get confused and they'll hand me this part in and think it's the rough draft. This is not your rough draft. This stuff, I never have to see this part. This part is for you, okay? Oh my gosh, look at the time. Ooh, okay, we're gonna kind of race through. First paragraph. Paragraph number 1 is the lead. All your details, again, I'm gonna take that out because I don't think the how has to be there. The 5 W's should be. The who, what, where, when, and why. After you finish that whole little paragraph, it might be a sentence, might be like a really long detailed sentence or 2 sentences. Leave a space between it and your next paragraph, okay? Now, next paragraph, that's going to be your most important details. What is the most important thing about this story? What's next? Does it include an important quote? Maybe somebody official, like a band counselor or a band constable, is going to say something about the incident. Newspaper paragraphs are not usually very long, in part because they're written in very narrow columns. They're not usually written across the whole page, right? So often 2 to 3 sentences per paragraph is pretty typical. And generally when you switch paragraphs, you're switching the focus of the writing to a new topic. So once you've written what you think are the important things, leave a line before you get to the next paragraph. And maybe you've got 2 paragraphs that are full of stuff that you think is important. That's fine too. And then you get down to things that are less important, but that still might be interesting to the public, right? What is another quote that you might want to include from a different source, right? News articles don't necessarily have a closing or concluding sentence like a summary paragraph might have. Occasionally, they might include relevant information about an upcoming event or situation that ties into the main story. And let me show you what I mean. Let me see where it is. Bank Street was closed last night for 2 hours while officers investigated the accident. It appears that the bus driver had followed all traffic regulations and that Johns had tragically run into traffic. And then it just stops. It doesn't give you any kind of wrap up or summary or relist all the points. It just stops. It's very abrupt. So keep that in mind when you're writing, okay? Where are we at? Yep. Okay, so an important note on quotations, we will talk about this a little bit tomorrow, but I did want to cover it before we moved on. A quotation usually has what's called a tag, and the tag explains who's talking and how they're saying it. Newspapers often will deliberately use very neutral words, words that don't imply a lot of emotion for this part. Words like said, explained, replied, responded, declared, or announced. So an example is, the mayor said, "We welcome new businesses to town and want to make investing here easier for them." So the tag part is the part where it says the mayor said. And you can see there's a little comma right after that. That comma is kind of giving you the heads up that the quote's about to come. The quotation part is, "We welcome new businesses to town and want to make investing here easier for them." And the quotation is surrounded by opening and closing quotation marks like these, right? If you were writing them, it looks like a little 66 and then like a little 99, okay? And you'd put them like right here in front and then right here at the end, right? And it's almost, I always picture like two little cupped hands kind of holding the quote so you can see it. When the quotation comes last, the period inside the quotation mark counts for the entire sentence. You don't need to write a second period. Like I wouldn't need to do another period here, right? I've already got that period. It counts for both. If for some reason I had a different quotation, like if I had like exclamation or a question mark, I could then put a period there if I wanted to. We'll talk more about that. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail because quotation marks have a lot of tricky little bits and pieces to them. Sometimes the tag comes last. So the quote comes first, the tag comes last. So an example here, this is from the Windsor Star. "I'm obviously disappointed in the outcome, but hope they find what they're looking for with an OPP contract," said Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkins, who chairs the police board. So here they put the quotes around the words and then they put the tag, and then they explained who he is. Like, why does the mayor care? Well, he cares because he's on the police board and it would have created a lot of money for Windsor, right? The exact words are enclosed with beginning and ending quotation marks, just like before here. And if the tag comes after the quote, then the period comes at the end of the tag. We don't put the period in here, okay? The period becomes a comma to kind of show that the sentence is still continuing. Now, if for some reason he had, say, done an exclamation point, then you would leave that there to show the emotion. Same thing if it was a question mark. But if it's just a period, which a lot of times it's going to be, they change it to a comma, and then the period doesn't happen to the end of the sentence, okay? Where are we at? We're good. A quotation by a new person, you have to start a new paragraph. It's a way to make sure that people don't get mixed up about who's talking, and you put a space between the two paragraphs. So Constable John Smith said, "We always come and support the youth basketball program. We think it is a great way to make connections to the community." And now there's a space there. So that tells the reader, hey, someone new is talking. We get to see the police out of their uniform and just playing on the court with us. It makes them a lot less scary, explained Peter Loon, captain of the team. Here we go. Make sure your rough draft is long enough and that it covers all the main points, okay? It should be in complete sentences. It should be in paragraphs. It should contain all the relevant information required. It should be the appropriate length, which is 1 page. It should include the headline. It should include the photo or the picture. Oh, it has to have a quote. Remember that it has to have a quote. Has to. Okay, you will lose marks if there is no quotation mark. Okay. The other one thing I'm going to mention is, I don't know if it can explain this very easily, but it should sound like a news report. And the phrase I'm going to use is objective. Okay. Objective, not opinionated. Right? They don't give a lot, they don't write what they themselves think, and they absolutely don't mention what they feel, right? It's just not considered appropriate in writing a news article. So if we go back to the sample, no, here we go. Right, he doesn't say, I feel sad. You don't even really know who's writing it. He reports what other people may have said about how they feel, right? He also doesn't make any judgments. He doesn't say, oh, he was a bad guy for doing this. Oh, the bus driver was horrible. Or he doesn't give his opinion about what happened. The closest you get is the phrase tragically. And I question whether you would see that in a real article. We are kind of out of time at this point. So this is assignment 12. It is just the rough copy. So all you're doing is you're brainstorming and then doing your rough copy. It does not have to look amazing. It does not have to be 100% your best words and your best sentences and everything. We will worry about all that stuff when we do assignment 13. Okay. So thank you so much for listening and for showing up today. And I hope you find this assignment fun and are successful with it. If you're not, give me a phone call. I'll be happy to walk you through how to do it. Okay.